On the D word from the very beginning, we've had a topic called shameless self-promotion, and we always encourage it in our face-to-faces. Even though this is about crowdfunding, feel free to shamelessly self-promote in the chat and tell folks what you're up to and anything you want to announce or let people know of. Which leads me to do one little teeny bit of shameless self-promotion myself before we get on to crowdfunding, although it is somewhat related. Erica mentioned at the beginning that the D word grew out of this blog that I kept during the making of this film homepage, which was about focused on the web's kind of a notorious young first superstar blogger way back in 1996. And he kind of cajoled me into opening up, doing my own blog. And I thought rather than write about my personal life, I would write about the making of this film. And of course, as it evolved, my blog got more and more personal as it sort of made it natural for my film homepage to become a personal documentary, which actually led to like three more personal documentaries that I've made. So here it is, like 30 years almost later. I'm coming full circle and I'm doing another blog. I'm going to be starting a Substack devoted to personal documentary filmmaking. I'm calling it Getting Personal with Doug Block. And I haven't I'm launching it this coming week. I think I'm aiming for Tuesday to put my first post up. But I'm putting a link in the chat for where you can subscribe to it. And by the way, part of the reason I'm doing a Substack is in anticipation of doing a crowdfunding campaign for my current personal documentary, Betty and Henri and Me, which led me to our special guest today. So I want to welcome Bri Castellini. I did a ton of research on crowdfunding. I've been avoiding it all these years, other than doing crowdfunding for our annual crowdfunding for the Deed Word, which is easy. One, because we have three other co-hosts, and also because basically the only rewards is like keep us in business for the D Word for another year. It's not labor intensive in that way. But I've heard over the years how much work crowdfunding can be. And it's kind of been terrifying. And I haven't ever done it for any of my own films. So I wanted to put a lot of thought into it, and kind of use what I went through and where I'm at with my film as a model for, in my talks with Bri and in thinking about a crowdfunding campaign. First and foremost, I've shot, let's say 95% of my film. I've made a work sample that I think is strong. But I haven't begun editing yet. And I know whatever I'm going to be asking for, let's say $35 to $50,000, might be realistic. It's not going to get me through finishing the film. I probably have another, 300,000, let's just say, to raise. So that leads me to, welcome, Bri.
Thank you. Hello. Thanks for having me.
But it leads me to my first question, which is, we're, in this day and age where, money is tight for people, we're afraid that people are tired of crowdfunding campaigns, and we don't think that what we're going to raise is necessarily going to finish the film. Is this a smart time to be thinking of a crowdfunding campaign? How do you kind of justify it? And or what, is there any good time to start, particularly great time to start a crowdfunding campaign?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a fair question. And I think you're right that people are definitely burnt out on crowdfunding, given the state of the world, even outside of the filmmaking stuff. But I think that that is where a lot of the struggle comes from, is making sure that your campaign doesn't feel like another crowdfunding campaign. And I know that that's like a really random thing to say that is not very helpful, but like ultimately, what I have seen in my career is that the best campaigns are the ones that don't feel like them. They may have the trappings of a crowdfunding campaign, but of course, people are going to be burnt out if they're being constantly hit up for money. What they're not going to get burnt out of, which we know from all of human history, is being offered new cool things to be a part of, to watch, to enjoy. And when you can frame a crowdfunding campaign as you are offering something rather than taking something, that can be a really powerful psychological difference, both in the way that you design the campaign and run it, as well as the way that it's received. So my big immediate piece of advice is try not to think of crowdfunding as fundraising. Think of it as audience building. And a lot of decisions are going to start to be a lot clearer and a lot less soul-sucking to make. In terms of like when to launch, there isn't necessarily a better or worse time there's not a better time, I should say, to launch a crowdfunding campaign. There's a best time for each person, each film. Doug, you and I talked about this for your film about like when does it make sense for the kind of thing that you're making? When are you going to be in the zeitgeist most? When is most useful to you and your community? But there certainly are worse times to crowdfund. And I would say the absolute worst time to crowdfund is end of October through end of December. Holiday season, the two biggest things you need on your side for a crowdfunding campaign are attention and people having a little bit of extra money. And they have neither of those things during that period of time. They're traveling and spending money on traveling. They are spending time away from their computers with family. They're spending money on gifts and travel. So no one has extra money during that time and no one is at their computer. And so you aren't able to harness the attention, even if they had extra income. So I generally recommend people stay away from crowdfunding during that period of time. Not to say that you can't do other kinds of fundraisers over the holiday season. I definitely know people who have had really successful like in-person things and like mask them as a holiday party. But that's obviously an entirely separate beast, and that is kind of capitalizing on the fact that nobody is online. And then really any other time of the year is pretty much the same as long as you are approaching the campaign thoughtfully. But yeah, so there's not really like if you launch in February, you're going to be 98% more successful than anyone else. That's not really a thing. There's not even a thing with like day of the week. Um, Tuesdays tend to be best, but that's not a hard and fast rule. So yeah, I would say as long as you're not launching during the holiday season, the winter holiday season, that is, you're pretty much good to go.
How do you figure out how much to ask for?
Also a great question. The answer is what you need. And that seems like a really simplistic answer, but it is surprisingly something that people don't often consider. I think that most people start from a place of, well, I just need money. So whatever I can get my hands on, I'll be happy with. Or they'll set a goal that's like, I think I can probably raise this much money based on no actual data points. So I'll just say that because, well, the number I just put down made me feel really happy. Maybe if I have that money, I'll be successful. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it because it is both harder than to communicate to people why that's the amount you sent, but it is also not actually based on anything and can make failure more of an inevitability when it absolutely does not need to be. So, what I tell people is regardless of the phase that you're in, what is the minimum viable dollar amount that if you don't raise that amount of money, it's pointless to keep people's cash anyways. This conversation usually comes up when I'm talking to clients about whether or not they want to go with a platform that is like flexible funding versus fixed. And I have a lot of thoughts on that topic. The high level thought is who do you want to shoulder the risk, you or your audience? Now, there's an emotional answer that I'm sure all of you immediately have, but the realistic answer, especially when you're trying to think of crowdfunding beyond just hitting up friends and family, but also ideally reaching beyond that network and finding fans and people interested in the work, it is really challenging to convince a stranger or a person who doesn't know you as well to give you money if you're going to keep it even if you can't keep your promise. Because at the end of the day, a crowdfunding campaign is a promise that you are making to an audience. You are telling them, this is the amount of money I need to deliver on the great thing I've been telling you about. And when you use a flexible funding platform, you're already breaking your promise. It is so much harder to get people to commit if they know that it doesn't matter if you can fulfill your promise or not, you're keeping their money. And that's really challenging for people. And there's a reason why platforms like Indiegogo have a much lower success rate than the Kickstarters and the Seed&Sparks of the world. So that this all comes together because usually people go with a flexible platform because they're like, well, any amount of money would be helpful. Incorrect. I know that's incorrect. If somebody gave you $10 right now, what would you actually do with that? And that's it, just $10. There, you have a number in mind of this is at least going to get me started. This is at least going to get me past the rough cut phase if you're in post-production. This is at least going to, get us through principal photography. Whatever it is that allows you to meaningfully move forward with your project, that's the number that you're crowdfunding for. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the number that you're crowdfunding for in a singular campaign. There's absolutely precedent for stage fundraising, for fundraising a couple of times over the life cycle of your film. I'm working with a filmmaker right now that I know some of you know, Liza Donnelly, who is right now planning to crowdfund for the second time for the same project. Absolutely precedented. That's a thing in crowdfunding, especially for filmmaking, where it's not like you raise money and then the next month a movie exists. Like filmmaking is a long process, especially in documentaries. So the life cycle of the film is probably going to a certain extent, reflect the life cycle of your crowdfunding campaign. But all that is to say, how much should you be asking for? Whatever the minimum viable dollar amount is, whatever that looks like to you, because at that point, it gives you a clear-cut motivator, and you now have a data point to start thinking about the other parts of crowdfunding and start using the data of like success rates and conversion rates to set a goal for what else do I need to actually make it likely that I can raise this minimum viable dollar amount. So things like building your email list, building your outreach plan, that kind of stuff. It's hard to do that in the abstract, but having a clear-cut goal, you can reverse engineer, all right, how many people ideally based on the data do I need before this starts feeling like a realistic minimum viable dollar amount versus a pie in the sky?
Yeah, you made a great point, Bri, because earlier I said, yeah, I didn't really want to start the crowdfunding because I can't raise and I had this idea that you have to be able to finish the film on the money you're raising, or people won't contribute. When in fact, what you're saying is what will get me to the next level. How
The
do I
next
make it
phase.
sound like that's really urgent? Yes, $50,000 won't help me complete the film or even complete the editing, but and personally, I don't like just getting to the rough cut stage, and then having to possibly lose the editor because I don't have the rest of the money. But, for people who are contributing, that sounds really compelling. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, at the rough cut, I can get more money, I can go out and show it and possibly raise the finishing funds. So,
Exactly.
really good point.
It's about making progress and making progress that doesn't feel abstract for the supporters. I had this conversation a couple of days ago with somebody who was thinking of running a development campaign. And they were hoping to use the money primarily for like setting up their LLC, paying for a lawyer, doing development, right? Like classic development stuff. And something that we talked about was that while that is what they need the money for, when you're doing a crowd fund, you're not fundraising. These people don't have a financial stake in your business. So it's not very exciting to pay someone else's lawyer fees and then maybe in a couple of years a film comes out of it. That's not to say that development campaigns aren't possible, but what we talked about was what is something tangible and like creative looking that you can also use some of this funding for? Can you do a sizzle reel? Can you film a test scene? Can you design like a really interactive behind the scenes featurette of like the development process on a creative level? I was like, give people something that makes it look like you're making a movie you and I know that hiring a lawyer and forming an LLC is part of making a movie. But for a layperson, for a person who just watches movies, that is still like a very abstract concept that isn't fun to participate in. So a lot of crowdfunding is about figuring out, especially if you're doing stage fundraising, being really clear cut about what is this actually funding and ensuring that part of that is something that they can consume, that they can watch, that they can enjoy, that they can feel like they had a hand in making, that shows visual progress that looks like the progress of making a movie. So that's for staged financing and development campaigns. That's always my big advice is like, how can you make the boring film stuff still feel like the fun film stuff? Even if it's a small fraction of what you're ultimately fundraising for, even if most of the money that you're fundraising for is going towards the admin costs and, the more abstract development stuff. How can you make it fun for the audience so that they see progress has been made, so you have new content the next time you crowdfund, and so they feel like they're part of this cool movie making journey rather than, they're an endless stream of money that eventually maybe will net them a movie, but right now feels like kind of boring. Like now I'm part of your household budget. That's not fun for me.
Yeah. By the way, Bri has like generously written an awful lot about crowdfunding and has a crowdfunding resources list on index on her page. I'm going to put it in the chat. I did it earlier, but there it is
Julie
again.
also just did as well.
Yeah. Speaking of aging well, we did back before we did our Friday face-to-faces, we did week-long special topics on the D word and brought in special guests. And back in 2011, we did a crowdfunding topic with Jennifer Fox and
Oh yeah.
Kathleen Nulfi
Hmm.
on my reincarnation. And at the time, it was the highest raising. I think they raised more money than any other filmmaker had. They set out to raise 50,000, raised 150,000, and we're going to put the link in the chat at some point here, hopefully soon. Um, but I highly recommend going back and reading it. It's in our archived topics. It is completely relevant today, just because it was 2011. All of the techniques that they used and lessons that they learned in the course of doing the crowdfunding campaign are there and really helpful. Um, so, Bree, you mentioned, doing this as a way to build up your email list and outreach and all that. But what if you're thinking about doing a crowdfunding campaign, you have like virtually no email list? You just don't have a lot of, you're not big on social media. And so you don't have all these followers and stuff. How do you get the word out that you're even doing the campaign?
Well, if you were my client, I would tell you maybe wait to launch. Because crowdfunding is 80% outreach and 20% the materials on the page and the idea that you have. That's not to say it's impossible to do without a dedicated following. And I want to be clear that when I say following, social media almost never factors into it. The point at which social media becomes even a slightly viable fundraising outreach tactic is at a magnitude of followers that most people are not going to hit until such time as they kind of don't need crowdfunding anymore. Social media, even at its peak usefulness in crowdfunding, never converted on average more than 2%. When I say converted, I mean no more than 2% of people who actually saw a crowdfunding post on social media ended up actually taking action on that post, i.e., giving money. So when you think about, if you have like a perfectly healthy, let's say 1,000 followers on Instagram, at most, at best, 2% of those followers would have ended up actually giving you money. And most of the time, that 2% is a wildly large percentage. These days, especially as algorithms have changed, as the platforms that people are using rely less on text and don't have as many opportunities to directly link to things, the conversion rate is closer to like 0.5% to maybe 1%. And even that, is still pretty high. So I'm not saying the social media is nothing, and certainly the better you have, the more you have on social media, the better engagement your platforms do, the better you're going to do. And this is true for every platform, whether we're talking about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or whatever they're calling it these days. All of them collectively have less than 2% conversion rate. So that's just my little spiel on social media. It's almost never a factor. Social media, the best thing you can use social media for, if you don't have like a big dedicated following on it that like would make that 1% really meaningful in conversion, the best thing you can do with social media is remind people that you've sent them an email. Your social media presence alone is not going to move a lot of needles, but if you've already emailed people or called them or had a conversation and then they happen to see a post, that's usually what triggers them to be like, oh yeah, they asked me about that. And now I'm seeing fun things happening. So maybe I should take action. But it's not the social media ever primarily that's making people take the action. Now, going back to the original question that I've deviated from about how to like spread the word, I would say anyone who doesn't have an email list does, they just haven't collected it yet. Because realistically, the first 2 or 3 times that you crowdfund, a majority of your support is going to come from people you already know. And most of those people, hopefully, you already have some level of access to, some way to communicate to them. Just because you haven't put it together in a spreadsheet yet doesn't mean that you don't have a decent starting point, probably, for who to reach out to when you start crowdfunding. So the first place I always start with a campaigner who doesn't have an email list is make one. Just as a thought experiment, put together a spreadsheet of absolutely everyone whose contact information you have, even if you don't intend to reach out to them for this particular campaign. Put them on the list. See, what is my starting network? Now, that's already going to start netting people more than they expect. They'll start putting people's names down and be like, oh, yeah, I do have this person's name. They actually would be a perfect person to email about this. So, like, just the action of filling out a spreadsheet with everyone you've ever met oftentimes nets greater results than people imagine. And that can also then give us a data point for, okay, what is the starting network? What is realistic within that? So I mentioned that social media converts about 1% at this point, and I'm being generous when I say 1%. Email, like direct emails, convert at a 20 to 30% rate. So it's almost 300% more effective to send an email than post a tweet, even if you have lots and lots of followers. I still default to Twitter. God help me. RIP Twitter. I miss Twitter. Twitter was the best social media platform for the stuff that I was doing and the kind of poster I am, and I will always miss it. But email, going back to email. Now, certainly in person, face to face, direct outreach is always going to net a much higher percentage. It's a lot harder to say no to somebody who's like right in your face. But direct emails converting 20 to 30% is huge. But that's still only 20 to 30%. And that's at best for an email list conversion. So having the number of emails tells you the number of people that are likely to actually ultimately go on to give you money. So there's a lot of like math that we can put in. I have equations. So taking the 20 to 30% rate, let's assume generously 30% of your email list is going to contribute. The average crowdfunding contribution across platforms is $25. So the average person is going to give you 25 bucks in your crowdfunding campaign. So if you take $25, multiply it by whatever 30% of your email list is, that number should equal, especially if you're an early crowdfunder, at least 50% of what you're trying to raise, because that is when you start getting momentum. And if you can get at least 50% guaranteed from just the math level, that is a really solid starting point to then start utilizing that network to find beyond that. If that number is less than 50% of your goal, you probably need to spend more time audience building and doing outreach, or perhaps you need to lower your initial goal and crowdfund for a smaller piece of the pie. Put a different way, take your entire crowdfunding goal, divide it by $15. That's the number of people who should be on your email list. So those are a couple of different ways to get to the same number ultimately. But that's why it's really important to have that outreach list and have an email list in place. Because without that number, it's really hard to say, do you think this is a reasonable amount for me to crowdfund? It's like, I don't know, man. Who do you know? Like, for some people, it is easy as pie to crowdfund for $50,000. For other people, it is impossible to raise 500. And it is hard to have a conversation in the abstract without having some of those data points to look to and to start making strategic plans and like real strategies based on real things rather than like hopes and dreams. So anyone who comes to me and says, I want to raise any amount of money and I have no email list, crowdfunding is not how you start an email list, it's how you build upon an email list, is what I would say.
In one of your articles that we've linked to, you talk about the biggest mistakes that filmmakers can make. And one of them is relying on, I thought it was interesting, relying on celebrities or press is a mistake that it's not hugely helpful. But I want to build on that by asking, I've heard from other crowdfunding experts, the importance of having sort of a core team that will hopefully themselves have big email lists that can advocate for you and will help you. So can you talk a little bit actually about both things, about you know celebrities not being helpful, and the importance of a core team?
Of a team. Yeah, for sure. So the core, I'll tackle core team first because celebrity is a smaller piece of this. But a core team, I think it's a mistake when people crowdfund when they think of it as a fundamentally different animal than anything else that they're doing in their filmmaking career. Because the fact of the matter is that a crowdfunding campaign is as much of a production as the ultimate film that you're trying to fund. And if you wouldn't be alone to film, then you wouldn't be alone to make a crowdfunding campaign. And certainly you wouldn't be able to do it on a timeline that is manageable and reasonable. A crowdfunding campaign is a full-time job for the period of time that you are doing it for, and that includes the pre-production phase, which almost no one does, and which is so, so vital to success, even just in gathering, resources. So a core team is really, really valuable because a single point of failure is never a good thing in any industry, in any project. That's not to say it's impossible to do something with a single point of failure, but it's a lot harder. And why would you do that to yourself? So a core crowdfunding team is like really vital, even just on a level of mental health, because there's a lot of work and a lot of faith that you're putting in yourself and your health that like for the next month and a half, I'm going to be good every day. I'm going to have exactly the same amount of energy. I'm going to have the same amount of time in my day to dedicate to things. No, you won't. You simply will not. And without a team, without somebody to delegate to, if you have to go away for the weekend, if you're sick one day, if you get inundated with other work for a couple of days and can't really check in on things, not having someone to have your back is a huge mistake. And it'll make you more stressed out. It'll make your crowdfunding campaign less successful. Don't do that to yourself. There's also just the level of labor delegation. Not everyone is good at everything. I'm sure many of you are multi-hyphenates because as filmmakers, we kind of have to be in this day and age. But just because you're a multi-hyphenate doesn't mean that you are equally as confident and competent at every part of the process as you are others. So the other thing a team does is helps spread the love a little bit. If you're someone who's really, really like confident in the text part of things. You're great at writing emails and social copy. You can craft great blog posts that engage people in the process of filmmaking, but maybe you're less confident in the graphic design. Certainly at the volume at which you're going to need imagery for a campaign. That's a great thing to hire elsewhere for. Who do you know that has a great sense of graphic design and for whom it is a lot easier and more efficient to generate a bunch of stuff that all looks really good to help you out there? Are you someone who is really great at research, but not great at the actual reaching out? That's also a valuable person to have on your team. Someone who can just dedicate their time to finding places on the internet and elsewhere that people who are probably in your core audience are hanging out at. Just giving you a list of, hey, you should reach out to these couple of people. That research is a lot of labor. It's a lot of time. And having someone just focused on that while you focus on like the building of everything and then the eventual outreach helpful. Always helpful to have help. But then finally, as we were just talking about with outreach being such a major component of crowdfunding, the more people sending emails on your behalf, the more people getting emails. The more people who are being told about the project who have a personal connection to it, and that expands your ability to do it, that initial outreach exponentially. So for all of these reasons and more, have people around you. Friends don't let friends crowdfund alone. Like, don't do that to yourself. Don't let your friends do that. Don't let your colleagues do that. And especially when you're working in it, even if it's not like your final team, it's not your ultimate producers who are working on the crowdfunding campaign with you, helping each other out. Like you're a part of this major community, everybody here, and probably you're working in similar spaces, if not just in format, in like theme and what kind of stuff. Offering your support to your colleagues during their crowdfunding, just because you're not doing outreach on your own, you don't want to burn your own list, doesn't mean that you can't still meaningfully contribute to your colleagues' success. And you're going to get a lot from it because now you have a much lower stakes way to learn the process, see what works, see what doesn't, do research on their behalf that you can ultimately use for your own. And that is not only going to strengthen your community, it's going to make you more like beloved member of it, but you're also gaining a lot even if you're not the one actively crowdfunding. So I highly encourage you all to not just contribute to each other's campaigns, but contribute in labor because holy cow, there's so much labor that goes into crowdfunding. The more people that you have on your side, of course, the easier it's going to be. And then just to speak briefly to the celebrity of it all, I have seen so many celebrity campaigns, and I say celebrity campaigns, what well, I mean it in both ways. So celebrities running campaigns and celebrities who are included in campaigns fail miserably because the assumption is name recognition equals success, and that's simply not the case. In the same way that it's not the case that passive crowdfunding exists, because it just doesn't. I have people ask me all the time, like, how do I get on Kickstarter's front page? How do I get to be, a selected project on Indiegogo? And my answer is, who cares? There are answers to those questions, which of course change as the people come and go from those platforms. But ultimately, it does not matter because crowdfunding is so popular and so just an expected part of day-to-day life in all sectors, not just in the arts, that no longer is anyone sitting on Kickstarter and refreshing the front page saying, man, I wish I could give someone $1,000 today, but they have to be interesting. So I'll just sit here and wait with my $1,000 and hope that something exciting comes across my eyes. That actually did used to be a thing, back in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, when crowdfunding, especially for the arts, was still relatively new in just as a process. There were people who kind of creeped and waited to see how cheap they could get an executive producer credit, right? That absolutely was a thing. But I think a lot of people still think that that's true, but it hasn't been true in over a decade because there's simply too much going on anymore. There's simply too many crowdfunding campaigns happening on any given day. It is too overwhelming. There are too many other places to give money. So the only way that people are going to take action is if you go to them directly. And so that same principle is true when you have a celebrity, either as a subject of your project, as an actor, even as like an executive producer. The name recognition is useful to you, certainly. I'm not saying that there aren't ways in which you can use this name recognition to your benefit, but 90% of the time that I see celebrities involved in a crowdfunding campaign, they are involved in name only. So that's really the only benefit you're getting. Like, unless Issa Rae is out there like shilling for you on her social media, unless she is emailing her list of investors and like going hard multiple times throughout the campaign, having Issa Rae's name on your project is only going to get you so far. And depending on that, for like, well, if her name's there, then I'll just sit back and let the money roll in. It's just simply not going to happen. Even if she offers, a signed headshot. I don't know why Issa Rae is the first name that came to mind, but like, even if you're like, let's get her to sign some headshots and like we'll use that as a reward. People know her and she's famous, so they must then want a Sharpie with her name on it and a picture of her. Um, Maybe. But again, she's not the one going out there. The power of a big name, a celebrity, is not their name in a crowdfunding capacity. It is their network. And if they are not leveraging their network, then their network doesn't do you any good. Even if they repost once in a while, we talked about how social media is not converting very well. And even with a celebrity, camp platform involved, if they're not the one originating the posts and if they're not doing it on a regular basis, so the algorithm picks it up amidst everything else that they're posting where they're not asking people for money, then your conversion rates nothing. It's a fraction of a fraction of a percent even then. And then everyone's just resentful and upset. Like, why did the fame not help me? Because fame is different now. The internet is different now. And we can no longer rely on just, oh, I know that person, so of course I'll give them my money. Because that's true for 80 other campaigns. So who's putting in the work? Who's actually directly leveraging their audience and community? If it's not your celebrity, then you can certainly involve them, but they're probably not going to be as much use to you on the crowdfunding level as you're hoping.
Um, Getting back to your comment about how helpful it can be to be a core team member for somebody else's campaign. Um, I will just mention for latecomers, I am doing a crowdfunding campaign working with Bri, who convinced me to move it from late fall to early next year. And I'm certainly looking for core team members. So just get in touch with me if you'd like to. I'm already doing the pre-production. Um, and part of that is putting in, hold on, I'm going to put it in the chat for latecomers that I started I'm launching a Substack on personal documentary filmmaking, in part to build up my email list. Bree, you mentioned Liza Donnelly earlier, who's a friend and who I've been, helping out a bit with, and she has built up her entire email list through her Substack.
Mhm.
She no longer uses MailChimp or any of the email platforms she had, and she's gotten thousands of subscribers. And of course, she like she writes every day, which I do not plan to do.
I
But
don't know how she does it.
I
The
don't know.
amount of content that that woman
Uh,
puts out that's high quality, that's interesting,
yeah,
her
but Bree
mind.
could not have spoken more highly about the help you gave her on her campaign. Um, so I want to get speaking of pre-production stuff. One thing that is really, really important is like the short video that goes out with the campaign.
Mhm.
Let's just say it's Kickstarter.
Yep.
Um,
My favorite platform for the record, if
is
anyone
there
was
an
wondering.
ideal length? You generally, the filmmaker should get on at the beginning on camera and do an intro. Then there should be like a short video piece. I'm like, tell us about the different ways of doing what you think maybe is the most effective way of doing a campaign video.
For sure. So I actually have an entire half-hour workshop just dedicated to making a crowdfunding pitch video. It is currently available as video on demand on Holly Shorts' Bitflix. So if any of you know the Holly Shorts film festival, they've been around for 20-ish years, I think a little over 20 years, and they have a video on demand channel. So if you're curious about that, let me know. And I think it's linked at the top of the link that y'all keep sharing from my website. Yes. Yeah, it's linked on the top of the page. So for the real in-depth version, you can go there and check out that video on demand workshop. But for the purposes of this conversation, the high level advice I give for crowdfunding pitch videos is that yes, you should be in it. No, you should not be the first thing I see. And yes, keep it short. So like those are like my highest level pieces of advice. So I know, especially when I'm talking to like writer directors, and especially when I'm talking to most documentary filmmakers, they don't like being on camera. Valid. I would love to not have to be on camera in a lot of contexts. I have made my peace with it in many ways, but I understand that that can be uncomfortable for folks. And so they either lean too far into it and say, well, you said I have to be there, so here's my, wretched visage. Or they go in the complete opposite direction and they're kind of like a ghostly voice over a bunch of B-roll. Both of those options are obviously not ideal. So the reason it's important to appear on camera at some point in some fashion during a crowdfunding pitch video is because you're asking for money, right? You are the representative of this project. This is your baby. This is your, precious boy or whatever. I don't know why I'm calling your campaign a precious boy. I'm sorry. It's very early for me. But it's important to put a face to the name of the person who's going to be depositing your check, right? There is a level of trust and credibility that you need to build, a rapport of sorts between yourself and the people who are you're making yourself vulnerable to. That doesn't mean that you need to be on camera the entire time. That doesn't mean that you need to be the one solemnly delivering all of the information, but at some point we should see you. But the reason you shouldn't be the first thing we see is because anyone who's on this campaign page because they know and care about you have already decided whether or not they're giving you money. The video is not going to be what convinces them. The pitch video is not for people who know you. It's for people who aren't sure yet, who want to see a little something before they ultimately commit to supporting you. And so, since I know you, Doug, if you come on camera, I'm like, oh, it's Doug. Of course I'll give Doug my support. But I'm not the person that you're making the video for. You've already convinced me because you and I know each other. For a random stranger, you're just some guy. You're some guy that you want them to know eventually. But the first impression that you want them to have from this little mini video you're using to fundraise for a bigger video, your face is probably not going to be the most persuasive thing. So the structure for a pitch video that I generally recommend is having between 10 and 20 seconds of some kind of footage or some kind of sizzle reel, some kind of audiovisual presentation that shows but doesn't tell what this project is going to accomplish, what it's going to feel like, what people have in store for them. Then short introduction, usually interspliced with additional B-roll, clips from past work, archival content, especially if you're making a documentary, news content to kind of showcase the topicality of what you're doing, whatever that is, and ending the video no later than like 2.5, 3 minutes in. Because a pitch video, while important, is not the entire conversation. It's the opening. It's the icebreaker for what you're going to spend the next 30 days or more of your life talking about. So don't feel like you need to put absolutely everything into that video. It should just be the high level stuff. Why me? Why this? Why now? Why you? So why me, the filmmaker? Why should you trust me? Hello, I'm not just some guy. I'm the guy that's going to make this. What do you mean this? Why this? Why is this an important topic? Why is this an important film? Why is it going to be unique and different? Why is it more important perhaps than anything else going on right now, or at least something worthy of giving attention to in this time and place? Why now? Why this time and place? Why is it topical right now? And why are you crowdfunding right now? Why is this the moment you're asking for my money, not 6 months ago or 6 months from now? Why is this the moment I need to get involved if I have been convinced? Why me? Why this? Now, finally, why you? The audience. What does the audience get out of this? On a concrete level of what might they get in exchange for their money in this immediate sense, but also, why do you think that this topic is going to speak to them? Why are these the people you're reaching out to? What are they missing? What's a problem they need solving? What's something that they wish they were seeing more of that this project can deliver? That's how you answer a why you, why the audience. And those are the questions that you want to try and answer as concisely as possible with enough visual aids as possible in a pitch video.
You mean to say all those things in 2.5 minutes, Bri?
Yep.
You're
And it's
talking
possible.
really fast, right? And
But
cut.
remember, you don't have to go into huge detail. Like this is the highlights. You have an entire 30 days of your campaign to deepen
Yeah,
the answers to those questions. But if you
okay,
don't have a log line answer to why you, why this, then you're not ready to crowdfund.
right. Let's talk about the stages of a campaign. Um, how far in advance do you want to actually begin the pre-production? What's involved in each stage as well? You talked about pre-production, 2 months out, 1 month out. What's the ideal time to start in advance? And how much time in advance?
Sure. So certainly, like if you've crowdfunded previous, oh my gosh, it's just me. Hello. Um,
Go to
so
gallery view, quick.
So certainly, if you've crowdfunded in the past, if you already have an email list that you don't need to do a lot of updates to, like you can shorten your pre-production period. But generally speaking, I recommend at least 2 months of dedicated pre-production prior to launching your campaign, if possible. Once again, the last workshop on that Holly Shorts video on demand class, the 30 minutes, I think it's 35 minutes is just dedicated to pre-production and I break it down by week. But again, to give you the highlights, that first like week or two of the 2 month period is usually dedicated to just gathering assets. Everything from like, what are all of the pre-production, production, what are all of the graphics that I have, all the pictures I've taken over the course of the making of this project, all of the research I've done, all of the clips that I have, all of the pictures, all of the, documentation, like what are just things I have about this movie that I was going to develop anyways, that I already have going, storyboards, whatever it is. What are my like high level themes of this campaign that I really want to hit on? If it's a pretty broad topic, it's like, well, what are the big ones? What are the big, if I had to make 3 or 4 keywords for this project, what would those keywords be? And so like those first couple of weeks are just about developing like, what is this? And what do I already have so that I'm not reinventing the wheel? And where am I starting from? What's the foundation I'm building? And if you don't already have an email list, this is when you should start just, oh yeah, that person from college, like putting them in your email list. This is the no pressure period of building your email list, of just like having it in the back of your mind as you go about your day. Who else should be there? Who should I check in with? Who should I include? Then the next portion is starting to look at those things that you've just curated and start making decisions about, all right, where might I employ that in the best practices of a crowdfunding campaign? What materials do I think are going to be great for the pitch video? What materials do I think I can save for campaign updates later on down the line? What are things that I think I can turn into incentives or rewards? What things would I want to include in my story to like focus that text portion of the main campaign? Then about a month out, the first week of the month out, so week 5 in this calendar that I'm constructing in our mind palaces together. That's when you start actually building the campaign. So now that you've made decisions, now that you've organized everything, now that you've started to assign segmentations to all of the assets, this is when you actually start building the campaign, writing your script for your pitch video and setting aside clips for B-roll, actually laying out, all right, what do I want my 5 to 7 rewards to be? Starting to frame out and draft your story, starting to frame out and draft like the updates that you'll eventually share that are not strictly, hey, we're crowdfunding, give us money, but rather more almost bloggy in fashion. Um, and then the rest of that month is about refining the campaign page, getting feedback from your team and your community, maybe starting to lightly tell people, hey, something's coming, maybe pay attention to the newsletter or this Instagram, whatever. And starting to then, once the like page is complete, I would say the last 2 weeks of the two month pre-production period is just dedicated to outreach. So, excuse me, pre-writing your emails, pre-writing as much social media copy as you are capable of doing so, pre-writing your campaign updates. Because the thing about it is that, like, while of course surprises are going to come across your desk over the course of crowdfunding, and that's wonderful, and we love that. A lot of this stuff is kind of predictable. You're gonna hit 50% funded. You can write, thank you for hitting 50% funded before you launch your campaign. And that way, when it happens, you're prepared and you don't have to like immediately react in the moment if you're, potentially going to be a little bit drained at that point. You can pre-write thank you messages for every tier of your rewards list, because probably depending on your rewards, you're going to need slightly different information or to share slightly different stuff with people depending on how much money they've given you. You can pre-write all of that. You can pre-make a cheat sheet for your team so that they aren't constantly pestering you in emails saying, hey, what's the link to the campaign? Hey, when does the campaign launch? Hey, what's the link to the campaign? Like, Having a cheat sheet, I have found helps tremendously with just the dissemination of information so that there's no guesswork. Hey, do we have an Instagram for this project or should I just tag you? That's the kind of stuff that can be included in a cheat sheet. And so like that's the final couple of weeks is just figuring out what days am I posting things? What days am I emailing people? Who am I emailing on those days? And what am I actually saying to them? That kind of stuff is sort of the last phase of pre-production, in my opinion. And for anyone who's like, this is a lot of work and you're saying a lot of stuff, not only do I have that video on demand class, I also just have like a really cheap template pack that you can buy, I think for like 25 bucks, where I have for pitch video broken it down by the second. If you're, I don't know how I can fit in this information in this amount of time. I have a template for that. I have an email list template that even walks you through how to use a mail merge add-on that will manage sending emails for you and a lot better. I saw somebody asked a question about like, what about a MailChimp? Can I just send everybody an email? Is that worth it? That's about as effective as a social media post because the thing is you're not being specific to anyone. They know everyone's getting it. So they're like, I'm sure someone else will give them money. But when you email somebody directly, when I say, hey, Doug, give me your money, it's a lot harder for you to say no than if I say, hey, everyone in the D word chat today, give me some money. Some of you might, and I thank you for it. But it's a lot harder when I single you out. And that's why direct email is really, really important. Yes, it's a lot more time, but it's also a lot more effective. But yeah, I have templates for all that kind of stuff, templates for the story page, templates for what the general arc of a rewards tier list is and what you might put in those places. So if you're just like, I need a place to start, I want to be able to Mads Libs this crowdfunding campaign, at least as a starting point, I have that as well. Yes, I am suggesting a direct email to each person. But that's why mail merge comes into place. Mail merge is basically a form email system that looks like direct emails that you can personalize, but much faster than literally starting a new email for every single person in your list.
Speaking of questions, we are going to open it up within minutes for your questions. So use the raised hand function, and I will call on you by name, individual. I will do it by name and not just go you. Uh, in the meantime, let me you talk about all these things that you offer. Let's go into that a little bit. You do consulting, but you
Mhm.
also actually, and this is why I was so interested in working with you. You do manage the campaigns. So can you
Yeah,
talk about the distinction between the two and also get into your, for those who are like budgeting for these things, what your fee is?
for sure. So the link that the folks have been putting in the chat will take you to all of these, but just to give you a high level look at what I offer, I kind of offer something for every budget level and every level of support. So on the cheapest side is just those templates that I just mentioned. If you want to gain from my expertise without ever having to talk to me or look at me again, that's valid and fair. You can buy a template pack and that'll set you up to at least have a starting point, to at least have a place to go to be like, should I include this information or not? Template pack should hopefully help a lot with that, which includes templates for every section of the campaign page, plus an email list template, plus an outreach plan template, which includes suggested like frequency for different kinds of outreach. So like that's a really good just like I can do it myself. I just need a place to start. Template pack, 25 bucks. I also offer a 1 day turnaround feedback package, which is just once you have a draft of your campaign, whether it's literally on the campaign page or whether you like made a Google Doc of just like this is what these are going to be my incentive tiers, this is my story section, that kind of thing. You send that to me, and within a day, I write a page or two back to you of personalized feedback on every section. I offer suggestions. I usually point you to direct resources. I'll sometimes brainstorm with you, especially if a part of your campaign is like, I don't know what to put here. Should I have something here? And I will suggest, yeah, I think you should have here. Based on the rest of your materials, maybe it could be this. So that's 60 bucks, 1 day turnaround. That's just I need a second opinion. I don't need to talk to you much. I just need a second opinion. Am I on the right track? So that's something I offer, especially for folks who are like, I'm at the end of this. I gotta launch soon, but I would like a second opinion. Then I have my most popular package, which is my crowdfunding strategy package. So with that, you get two dedicated 45-minute consults with me, scheduled at any time you like. You get all the templates that I sell separately, and you also get dedicated regular email access to me for the course of your campaign or 6 months, whatever comes first. And so that I mostly am useful to you in pre-production there, although of course you can schedule those calls whenever you like. Usually people schedule the first call right away after they've received their template so they can be like, your template said this. I disagree. Let's talk about it. Or let's brainstorm how I can build my campaign. And then they'll schedule the second call right before they launch to go over the outreach plan and say, okay, the campaign's done, it's set, it's ready, you've given me feedback, thank you so much. So now who do I email? How often should I be posting? And like that's when we'll kind of strategize that. So that's meant for you want regular access to a second opinion. You want a brainstorming partner. You want a strategy partner. You just want someone to answer the phone as it is while you're campaigning, so that you know you have someone who's got your back, who knows the process, who can help you strategize to set you up for success. But finally, I have the dedicated admin campaign manager package. So that's an hourly package. That is where I am much more involved in your campaign if you feel that you need it. I'm not going to send emails on your behalf because I shouldn't be emailing your grandma. I'm not going to do outreach on your behalf. However, I can manage the admin side, which is a lot of just time. I'll be the one, depending on what you need, setting up your email list structure, like formatting the spreadsheet. If you're like, spreadsheets make me ill, don't make me open Microsoft Excel until it's too late. That's fine. I can do that for you. I can organize it. I can do copywriting for you so that instead of just having a template to start out with, you send me materials about your project and I fill in the why me, why this, why now, why you for you. And then update from there. I can be the one in the back end of your Kickstarter, sending the thank you messages, delivering those digital incentives so that you don't have to worry about it. Managing the IT process so that like every time an elderly aunt wants to give you support, but is like, I don't know what Kickstarter is, and you're like, I don't have time for this. I'll handle that. I will send them emails. I will do your tech support and help out with that. This also can sometimes look like project management. So once we develop your outreach plan and your strategy for the campaign every day, I'll send you and the stakeholders of your campaign an email. Here's our daily to do. You have to post one thing to Instagram. You need to send this group of people an email with this template. Here's the graphics. Here's the copy. Go. And then at the end of the day, I'll send an email recap of this is how we did today. This is who you owe social media shout outs to. This is a preview of tomorrow so that you're prepared. So that way you're not having to like hunt down what you need to do every day. I will manage that for you and essentially project manage your crowdfunding campaign. So I have no skin in the game for that one as far as like I'm not a filmmaker, not a producer. I'm not expecting anything like that. I don't take any cut of the back end for any of my packages. I think that the money you raise is yours. I am just there to support you as much or as little as you want.
Did you mention the fee for doing the hands-on admin?
So my hourly rate is $50 with a required deposit of four. So the first 4 hours I work for you is covered by the deposit once you hire me. And then from there, it's $50 an hour.
Great. I have many, many more questions, but so do our
There's
attendees
many
here.
questions.
So I will get to those in the order that their hands were raised. Thanks so much, Bri. Lana.
Thank you so much, Bri. Thank you so much, Doug, Erica, and Julie for organizing this. It's so interesting, and I have a lot more many questions that I had before. So,
Just one, Lana.
yeah, can I ask you, is there the rate of the crowdfunding platforms, especially for films, and like for movie crowdfunding, is there like Seed&Spark or Indiegogo or something like that specializing for films? And also a second one little question, is there amount of sum you have to put to crowdfund not to be considered as amateur, I don't know, like not professional filmmaker, like if I put there $50 for my movie and everybody said like, oh, you're never gonna create a movie for $50. But is the amount of sum which I have to put? Sorry if my question is a little.
So can you repeat the
Thank
first
you.
question? I'm not sure I understand what the first question was.
The first question is there a special crowdfunding platform for movies?
Gotcha. I
Thank you so
think there
much.
are a couple. So I for clarity, so I worked for the platform Seed&Spark for 4 years. I was their manager of creator success from 2019 to 2024 or 2023. That's when I got laid off. So they originally were a filmmaking platform. They are now an artists crowdfunding platform, but still mostly film. That does exist. I wouldn't make your decision of what platform to use based on who is just for filmmakers because at the end of the day, the platform doesn't matter. So we talked earlier about how like getting on the front page doesn't matter because no one's sitting there. So for the same reason, nobody is just like making a account on a film only crowdfunding platform and being like, I can't wait for a filmmaker to find me. You have to go to them directly. So at that point, the platform doesn't really matter. You should make your decision on what platform to use based on like the features, the UI, the like ease of use, and the like particulars of the features on that platform. I actually have, I'm throwing it in the chat now, a comprehensive breakdown of the four major crowdfunding platforms that I
Bree,
encourage.
sorry, what is UI?
User interface. Sorry,
Okay,
I come from the tech world.
of course.
User interface. So, like, can you use the website? Is it easy to find what you need? Is it easy to edit? Is it easy to update? That kind of stuff. That's how I would recommend you decide what platform to use. And hopefully that blog post that I just posted for y'all is a good starting point. As far as the second question, I don't think that there is a minimum. You know, if you only need $50 to make your film and for whatever reason you don't have that right now, sure, crowdfund for $50. I wouldn't use that as like a stunt. I know there was that famous, what was it, like egg salad campaign on Kickstarter years ago that was like, I just want to make one egg salad sandwich, and they raised like tons of money. And some days I still get people being like, hey, I want to do an egg salad campaign. Like, I want to do a stunt campaign where I'm technically only raising $10. And I don't recommend that for a lot of reasons. You can't really like it's the same way that you can't make a viral video. You might make a viral video, but you can't intentionally create a viral video because the internet is wide and weird and strange and works in mysterious ways, and there is no way to harness virality or stunts in that capacity. And generally, I don't recommend making a joke out of the very real need to make a movie when your promise is vague, unless lightning strikes, it's very hard to guarantee that like that's going to do anything for you. And often is going to work against you. So I don't recommend planning on that. But as far as like minimum money, the minimum viable dollar amount is different for everyone. I have seen people crowdfund for like $500 and have it go really well. And that $500 was really useful to them. So I don't think you should feel bad if like your minimum viable dollar amount is lower than other people's. Everyone's different. Everyone's coming from a different experience. Just as long as like that is money that you need and you can account for it and you know how it's going to be used, I think go for it.
Bree,
Especially considering that crowdfunding is an audience building campaign as much as, if not more than, a fundraising one. So make sure that you're not just there for the 500 and out, like still use that as an opportunity to connect with people, to share thoughts about your film, to get the conversation started so that by the time the film comes out, you don't just have people who gave you money, you have people who are excited to see what their money bought.
Bree, in your experience, is there sort of a sweet spot of what to be asking for these days? Like what what
Nope.
you see? Okay.
Because again, it's so dependent on what money do you need to make your film? What money is realistic for you to raise based on your email list and network? What
Got
is
it.
going to be the great range for you is totally different from a great range for me. Something else I should say is, so I mentioned earlier the math portion of like figuring out, is this realistic for me? $25 being the average contribution. That's true on an average, but an average isn't like the whole information, right? Like anyone who is familiar with math knows that that's true. So that's also something that like is very dependent on audience. I have worked with filmmakers where the average contribution was closer to like $10 because they were mostly crowdfunding with an audience of like younger people, people who were still like greatly crippled by student loan debt, things like that. And I've worked with campaigns where the average contribution is closer to $50 or $75 because the people that they were asking for money and their network is more established, usually older, further along in their careers, has more disposable income. So the average amount of money you can expect on a per supporter basis is also hugely dependent on you and the kinds of work that you make. So what is realistic and what the realistic range is sometimes is going to be a lot more variable than the averages can assume.
Great. By the way, I still see a number of questions being asked in the chat, but we're not going to have time to answer those unless you put your hand up and come on camera and ask. Like, Ju, hi.
Hi, Doug. Thank you so much for organizing this. And thank you, Bri, for sharing your great insight with us. Like Doug, I'm a personal documentary filmmaker right now working on my first feature centered around parent-child relationship and how it evolved. So I'm very inspired by your idea of building a team for fundraising, which I have never done. It's always myself, and I have some success. But I want to ask you, in this context, are you, I want to know for the ones that you know who are successful at fundraising with a team, are they mostly volunteers that the filmmaker recruited? For example, fans or friends of theirs or fellow filmmaker, which in this case, the fellow filmmaker, my concern is that everyone's so busy with their own film. Like, how do they have time to help? I mean, maybe on a limited, in a limited way. So I want to ask you, in this case, does the filmmaker essentially become a manager of the team? Like they assign each person to whatever task they feel is a good match with their skill set, and then setting goals and just maybe elaborate a little bit on that, please. Thank you.
No, I think it's a great question. And so, like, obviously, again, it's very dependent. If you have the ability to budget for, support in one aspect or another, that's always going to make it easier for you to find people to help. But, I come from the indie film space as well. I'm a writer director. I know the barter system intimately. I have worked in a lot of people's campaigns back in the day where, I would do one or two small things in exchange for like they'd PA for me. So like there's absolutely that process. When you're talking on like a larger level, especially for features, especially for a community such as this, it's a little bit more professional. It might look the work swap might be a higher level, but something that I think that all of you should be thinking about in terms of team building is that not all of the work is going to be equal, but it's all going to be additive. So my advice to you when thinking of building a team beyond yourself is what are the parts of this that I hate the most? Like what are the individual tasks that I just don't want to do? What are the individual tasks that I can't do? What are the individual tasks that I think it would be nice to have someone else do? And from there, start putting feelers out. Find ways to frame those sort of jobs in such a way that like people will be like, oh, I could do that. Oh, I don't hate that as much. Like somebody was making fun of spreadsheets in the comments a while back. And like I know there are people in my life for whom I make spreadsheets who hate them, who can't stand looking, who don't understand how to use them. It's like they know that they're important, but they simply can't get their brain there. And so I have kind of become the go-to spreadsheet girl in my film community of like, if you need someone to just do a basic breakdown, to do a budget breakdown, to do an email list breakdown and formatting, I'm who you call. And then in exchange for that, I'll get support somewhere else. There are people willing to do all the stuff that you hate. And so it's just a matter of figuring out, well, what's going to incentivize them to do that? Is it because they really believe in the film and they just want to help out? They have an extra hour or two in their week, so they'll, chip in for that amount of time. Is it because you can offer them something in exchange during their campaign? So it becomes a true swap. Is it because they want to learn more about crowdfunding and so they're going to help you out a little bit just to kind of get a lay of the land? There's a lot of reasons why people would volunteer their time and energy, and it's just a matter of figuring out how are you going to spend that interest in giving you their time and energy? And how can you make it so that you are as open to that as they are? It's not saying that they need to join your team full time. They don't need to be right next to you in the trenches, but they can vacation at the trenches. They can stop by for a lunch hour or two, and that is going to be helpful to you because that's an hour or two that you don't have to dedicate to stuff that are probably going to take you much longer because you hate the stuff. So I would encourage you not to think of this as, how do I find 8 more me's who aren't going to take any money and make my film? Think of it as, what are the things I don't want to do? And could I put it out into the universe that maybe someone will follow through for me? And just make sure that you are open in return. Don't just take, what can you offer? What are the things that you know other people don't like to do or maybe aren't as confident in that you can spend an hour or two helping out with, to community build, to put out into the universe that you're a giving, collaborative person, etc.
Thank you so much. And I'll put in the chat for people who want to work with me. I do have a lot to offer, as you know me well.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Stu. We have 6 more people with hands up, so we're going to leave it at that in terms of we're not going to ask or recognize any more questions from people waiting. And I do ask the people asking questions to be as concise as possible because we're can you run a little bit over
Oh
the?
yeah, I'm good.
Great. Tommy, you're up.
Thank you so much. It's probably needless to say that honesty and authenticity are very important aspects of documentary filmmaking, and that certainly applies to fundraising, right? So you kind of underline the point, like, I think so. So my intention is to say, like, I need $7,000 for music licensing, $5,000 for festival submission fees, so on and so forth. What percentage of a goal is okay to use for tier rewards? Do you add $1,500 for tier rewards? And is it hurtful to do that? Is it hurtful to say I need $1,000 to admin this campaign?
It is not hurtful at all. I actually think the more transparency, the better. So Seed&Spark actually like builds this into the process. I don't think they built it in well, but I understand the impulse that they did. They have a wish list that makes it really like visually break down the budget and in theory allows people to donate specifically to certain elements. Like, I want to help with your film festival money, so I want my money to go directly to film festival stuff. It doesn't actually work like that, but it seems like it does. And in theory, that could be an interesting way to crowdfund. But yes, absolutely break it down like that. Let people know where their money is going so that they understand, oh, if I don't help you get to your 100%, you're not going to be able to do these very concrete things that I understand and am familiar with. As far as the question of budgeting for the admin stuff, in terms of percentages, as little as possible should go for the delivery of items. This is a much longer conversation that, not to be a broken record, I do have an entire workshop about crowdfunding rewards and how to design them and how to prioritize and things like that. And a big portion of that workshop is don't offer manufactured goods. The best of your abilities, you should not be spending the money you raise during a crowdfunding campaign on becoming a short-term merchandise company. You should be spending it on making your money. Making your movie. That's not to say that there aren't opportunities for merchandise, but I would say 90% of the time, merchandise is not actually as useful to you as you think it is, even if people are selecting it, and it often does more harm than good and is rarely, this is the time to do it. Merchandise is best used in distribution and marketing, and that's not generally when people crowdfund for. There certainly is campaigns like that, but ask yourself, like, especially when you're thinking of like t-shirts and posters and things like that, like how many posters are on your wall of movies that don't exist yet? How many posters are on your wall of movies by people you've never met that you haven't seen with actors that you're not familiar with? Probably none. So why would anyone, before your movie exists, buy a poster, buy a t-shirt, buy a mug? They probably wouldn't. But after a screening at a festival, after they've seen it on your website, probably that's when they're going to be compelled to say, all right, I have seen this. I am a fan of it. I want to spend and share my fandom somehow. Merchandise at that point becomes a lot more useful. So that's just like a high level thing. But yeah, I would spend as little money as possible on actually doing the campaign. Yeah, that is my high level advice there. But certainly you can say, and this is amounts for like admin and fees, accounting for crowdfunding fees, fiscal sponsor fees, consultant fees, that kind of thing. Absolutely include that.
Uh, Fiona.
Thank you. And please excuse me, Bri. My voice is very croaky today, but thank you both very much. Very quickly, should you ask family members connected to your story that you're producing, particularly if the story is about someone in their family?
That is going to be a very personal question, right? Like, and this certainly comes up more in documentary, obviously, than anything else. Um, I think it's a very case by case basis. It's also like, is some of the money going towards them or something that will benefit them? Then it's probably more likely that you can ask them to help sort of spread the word, at least reshare a couple of times, forward the email on. If it's a subject of your documentary who is not directly benefiting from the fundraising, maybe not. I don't know what your relationship is with them. Obviously, again, extremely case by case basis. But my general rule of thumb is if I'm asking this person to promote this campaign, especially beyond just like resharing on Facebook, is it benefiting them to do so? If not, I'll probably ask for less. I'll probably require less on their behalf. I will impose less on their time. But of course, everything is different. Some people are just uniquely generous and want to help out and are very excited. Let them do that for sure. But I generally don't ask people to do that unless whatever I'm doing is also meaningfully impacting them. Like I wouldn't ask my DP to post about the crowdfunding campaign if the crowdfunding campaign isn't going into their paycheck, as an example in the narrative world.
Great. Thanks. Peter.
Hey, Bree.
Hi, Peter.
Yeah. I
We know each
you
other.
you know so much. It's almost intimidating that there's so much to consider. And so I know that other people feel that way. And I just want to put out there that Bree is a master. And so the opportunity to work with her in any way, I think, is just amazing. And thank you, Doug, for putting Bree on display. Um, my question is around Seed and Spark. Seed and Spark had been a vibrant community. I know it's been morphing. You have so much experience with it. Is it a viable option?
Sure. It's certainly a viable option. I would say it's a more viable option for early stage filmmakers raising less than like 20K. It's best for like college students and early 20 somethings, I would say. And again, I say this as someone who was the manager of their creators for 4 years. And full transparency, was laid off 2 years ago and had a lot of feelings about prior to my layoff, the company I was working for, and certainly in the immediate post of being laid off. What I will say about Seed and Spark, and which you'll be able to see in that comprehensive article, which I'll share again, they are included. They are an absolutely viable option, but they've had a lot of technical difficulties that they are not overly prioritizing, which makes the user interface that I briefly mentioned earlier less viable. Their website hasn't really been updated in a meaningful way since like 2015. And you can tell, especially in the back end. They are severely understaffed, as displayed by laying me off. And I did a lot of stuff on their behalf that now they just straight up don't offer, or they offer in the most generic sense. And so a lot of the reasons why I would have, a couple of years ago, hardcore recommended Seed and Spark isn't really the case anymore. And there is a reason why I recommend Kickstarter when just as a straight up and down recommendation, regardless of circumstance. So that's what I will say about Seed and Spark.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for your transparency, Bri. Jim.
Should we be committing to a platform for life? Should we be using the same platform for all of our projects?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the standard ones are gonna be good for most contexts, so I don't see why you wouldn't. But it's certainly not if you use one platform once, you're locked in and it is disadvantageous to ever switch. The advantages of continuity is that the people who have already contributed to your campaign don't need to sign up to a new platform. especially folks that are not as technically savvy. Already having a account with like all their information saved can be valuable. There's a level of familiarity that's going to make the ease easier. And a lot of these platforms have mechanisms for like promoting future stuff on platform to make like linking and continuity a little bit easier for communication and audience transference and things like that. So like there are advantages to using the same platform, but you know, depending on circumstance, I don't think it's going to meaningfully change for better or worse if you decide to switch platforms for a later campaign.
Great. Marty.
Thanks a lot, Bri. It's very useful. Two like brief practical things and one general. One, you didn't give the cost for that third option, strategizing before the hourly. Is that a flat fee?
Oh, sorry. Yes, that is a flat fee. I think it's $4.99 is the price. I think. It's all on my website. It's laid out, and I'm also highly customizable. If there's something kind of in between a package that you're like, what if I could a la carte it like this? Email me. I'm happy to talk in more specifics.
Okay. And you think it's important to have a nonprofit deductible option, like a fiscal sponsor?
Some cases, yes, some cases, no. Generally, the answer is no, though. That's an additional person you're paying a fee to. And only 10% of Americans do something other than a standard deduction on their taxes. So for the majority of people, giving money to a crowdfunding campaign that's fiscally sponsored or not does not factor into their decision making at all. No one's going to write $25 off on their taxes. So unless there's like a handful of people in your community that you're like, they're not going to give me money unless I'm fiscally sponsored, or the fiscal sponsor in particular is like a huge proponent of and partner in your film, your campaign, I don't think it's necessary.
I also want to mention Bri offers like a 15-minute free
I do. Yeah. So
consult.
if you just have a handful of quick questions for 15 minutes, I do have a free link that on that page you can select and we can just chat.
Right. Shabari, is that am I pronouncing that correctly, I hope?
It's Charbri.
Oh,
Charbri. Okay.
Yes. I had a very quick question. First of all, thank you, Doug and Bri. The timing for this webinar is great as I'm getting started to launch my crowdfunding campaign in September. I'm just wondering, in terms of appeal videos, this is kind of like the last element that I have to do. Do you have any examples of any that you thought have done a great job of answering those why questions?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, but I worked with like thousands of campaigns at this point, so I don't have like specifics. I mean, Liza Donnelly, for her first campaign for her documentary Women Laughing, really, really, really great video. A great kind of combination of like personal appeal and clips from them setting up for their documentary. So look up Women Laughing on Kickstarter. That was a solid video. Another recent client of mine, also in the documentary space, was a documentary called Weed and Wine, which was really interesting. And theirs was a much more sort of not as fleshed out of a video. Liza's was a lot more of a professional production. She had her actual editor like putting the video together, and they had a bunch of like high quality behind the scenes stuff. Weed and Wine was fundraising for a second film. And so they really were only like utilizing clips from the past film and like images and then a personal appeal, but I still think the video turned out really nicely. They were also on Kickstarter, also a client of mine. So those are just two recent ones that are in the documentary space that I know made good videos that I think well answered those questions. But generally speaking, I mean, if a campaign does well, it's probably at least in part because their materials were put together correctly, and you'll start to notice commonalities between successful campaigns that usually you can kind of reverse engineer for yourself in terms of best practices.
Charbri, first, your animals are like very cute, adorable back there, and if you haven't already, put a little bit about what your film is in the chat so that people will know. George Nierenberg, I saw your hand up earlier and now I don't see it up anymore. Did you want to be like the final person to ask a question?
Yeah, it is. Okay. Bri, you're a gift from heaven. You're so generous. You're amazing. You stand out amongst many people that I've met. You're extremely generous, and I just want to thank you just for being there for the community. So
Oh, thank
you're
you so much.
and so I have a question. I have a film that's finished,
Great.
and I uh,
Congrats.
I want to know. Yeah, it's almost, 7 years, but and I want to know if I can use the campaign to raise money for the Impact campaign, get the film out there.
For sure. In fact, Liza Donnelly, who we've been talking about, who I'm working with again today, literally today, actually, the campaign I'm working on with her right now is her like finishing funds and distribution campaign. So her film is also already done, and we're raising to kind of like pay back some folks and to spur kind of the start of her distribution and stuff. So yeah, there's absolutely precedent for fundraising once a film is already made. In those cases, I would say it can sometimes be a little difficult because people understand a like pre-production campaign. They're like, you need money to film movie. But if movie already edit, that starts to make people a little bit nervous, especially if they don't really understand like the intricacies of that. So your job then is making it super, super clear and concrete what it is that this is funding and why that is useful and interesting to them. Because if the movie's already made, then you have to work that much harder to impress upon them, like, no, I do need your money because you're getting more than just movie. And you need to make whatever more than just a movie is in this equation really interesting and tantalizing to people who might not have an understanding of like the benefit of an impact campaign for, you for the film, et cetera, et cetera. You just need to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is probably going to be a fan of this movie, but who has no concept of the behind the scenes. How would you talk to that person about this and get them excited and hyped up about what you are fundraising to do?
Great. Great questions, everybody. So thanks for those. Bri, is there anything that we're not asked that you think is important to get out there? Or another way, I guess, of asking, is there if you had like one or two big takeaways to come away from this with, that you hadn't, or you want to re-emphasize, or
Yeah, because I feel like we really ran the gamut.
yeah,
It's not hard to just have like a long form conversation about crowdfunding. And you asked me earlier, like, do you want to screen share anything? I'm like, I think we'll be fine. I don't think we're gonna have a pause in conversation,
we did not.
which is great.
Yeah,
Great for me, especially. So, all right, things that I would love to just leave you with highlight. The first one I'm going to go back to is your email list. I know I'm a broken record. Your email list is honestly the most important part of your campaign. A good idea is a dime a dozen. A talented filmmaker is a dime a dozen. I know thousands, and I love all of them equally. But they're not all going to be equally likely to succeed in crowdfunding if they are not considering how to put their campaign in front of people. This is not an if you build it, they will come. Angels in the Outfield, I think, is the film that it's from sort of situation. You have to invite them. You have to send them an invitation. And if you don't have a clear way of doing that, then you are dead in the water. Not to be apocalyptic, but truly you are. If you do not have a plan to personally invite people to check out your page, it is going to be really, really challenging and an uphill battle to get the fundraising for the movie that does deserve to be told, a movie that does deserve to be made that we want to see. So have that plan in place. Start working on it early. You can be built, even if you're not thinking of crowdfunding for the next year, right now is the best time to start building your email list, to start putting some concrete structure around it, to have a system for when you meet people at festivals and networking events. And in the chat here, you can start plugging them in and personalizing how you might reach out to them. Like the earlier you put that structure in place around your audience and network, the easier crowdfunding and everything beyond that is going to be for you. So if you do nothing else today, make an email list and start putting some structure around it. That's number one. I would say number two, I guess we didn't really get into this, and it's a little bit less of a thing, I think, in documentary than narrative, but I do still think it's important. I said a lot that crowdfunding is as much about audience building as it is about fundraising. But something else I want to leave you with is that crowdfunding can and should be a creative exercise. I think a lot of the fear around crowdfunding comes from a place of thinking of it as a fundraiser, feeling vulnerable about it being a fundraiser, feeling vulnerable about asking people for money, and that's all valid and fair. And I think it's the wrong way to think about this. Don't think about crowdfunding as a way to make money. Think of crowdfunding as a way to talk for an entire month uninterrupted about a thing you're really passionate about. Find the most creative way to implement all of the best practices that we've talked about today and that I talk about elsewhere in my work. Find the most creative, unique way to apply those things. Let it be a challenge for your brain, for the creative and artistic side of you that exists because you're these wonderful filmmakers, and harness that as your North Star more than whatever the number you have in mind is for what you want to fundraise. If you can approach crowdfunding as a creative exercise, not only are you enabling yourself to be at your best, but you are also going to have so much more fun with this. And people can tell. People can tell when you're doing something because you feel like you have to and because you really want to. And so if you can make this process, which seems scary and vulnerable, something that you actually enjoy the puzzle of and the creation of, then that is going to be the most valuable thing you can do for yourself in the project.
Very, very helpful.
And please feel free to reach out if you have questions.
Yeah.
I'm very Googleable. Just find me on there.
Yeah, and I think an important note to leave on too, and it's one of the reasons why I so look forward to working with you is, I want to make my crowdfunding campaign, as fun and creative as possible. And, it's really important to me to work with somebody who will be fun and creative to work with. So very much look forward to that. I'm very appreciative, as you can tell by the chat and people who've come on, for your, you made it so easy for me. I barely even had to ask a question or two.
I told you I'm a monologuer.
I love guests. I love monologuers. You're my favorite guests. And anyway, hope you had fun, and thank you so much for coming on very short notice too. So
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, everybody. I hope to hear from many of you soon.